Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
You know how they say no good deed goes unpunished? I feel like my life has become the living embodiment of that phrase. It all started with a phone call, a desperate, panicked plea from my best friend. Leo, if I had known that saying yes would unravel every thread of the simple, predictable life I'd built for myself, I would have thrown my phone into the nearest river and moved to a cabin in Montana. But I didn't know. I was just trying to be a good friend. Patrick, you have to help me. I'm going to die. Leo's voice was a high-pitched squeak of pure terror, completely at odds with his usual laid-back demeanor. I was in my apartment, trying to figure out why my ficus tree was shedding leaves like it was autumn in the Amazon. Leo, calm down. What's wrong? Did you forget your anniversary with Chloe again? Worse, so much worse. He groaned. She found a number in my call history, a local number she didn't recognize, and now she's convinced I'm cheating on her. I sighed, abandoning the plan. This wasn't new territory. Chloe, his fiancée, was a wonderful person, in many ways smart, funny, and genuinely in love with Leo, but she had a jealous streak a mile wide. It was her one major flaw, a crack in an otherwise perfect vase. And whose number was it, I asked, already guessing the answer. It was the plumber, the guy who fixed the sink last week, but she won't believe me. She called the number, got his voicemail, and it's just one of those generic robot voices. No name. Now she thinks it's my secret burner phone for my secret girlfriend. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Leo, just show her the invoice from the plumber. Problem solved. I can't find it, and she's already spiraled. She's talking about calling off the engagement. Patrick, I love this woman. I can't lose her over a leaky faucet. His voice cracked. He was genuinely terrified. That's the thing about Leo. He's the most loyal, good-hearted guy I know, and he adored Chloe. Seeing him this distraught twisted something in my gut. Okay, what do you want me to do, I asked, resigning myself to another evening of relationship counseling. You want me to talk to her? Tell her you were with me. No, it's past that, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I kind of panicked. I made something up. Oh, no. I told her the number belonged to your sister, who's in town visiting you, and that I was calling her to ask for advice on a surprise gift for Chloe. I stared blankly at my wall. Leo, I don't have a sister. I know, but Chloe doesn't. You never talk about your family. It was the first thing that came to my mind. I even gave her a name. I was almost afraid to ask. What name? Patricia, he blurted out. I don't know, it sounded sisterly. I was silent for a long moment, processing the sheer stupidity of his lie, a lie that, somehow, now involved a fictional sibling of mine. So you want me to what? Find a woman named Patricia to pretend to be my sister? No, he said, and the desperation in his voice returned full force. Chloe wants to talk to her, now, to apologize for being suspicious. She wants to call the number back and speak to Patricia. The silence stretched again. This time, it was filled with a dawning, stomach-churning horror as I realized what he was asking. Absolutely not, I said. No way. Patrick, please, just for a minute, just get on the phone, put on a slightly higher voice, and tell her I'm the best fiancé in the world. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Leo, I can't put on a higher voice. I'll sound like a cartoon character. She'll know instantly. No, she won't. Your voice is already, He trailed off, but I knew exactly what he meant. It was the elephant in the room of my entire life. Thanks to a series of hormone treatments I had to undergo as a teenager for a pituitary gland issue, I'd been left with some lasting side effects. My voice never fully dropped, settling into a higher, softer tenor than most men. My skin was smooth, almost poreless. I barely had any body hair. My facial features were finer, my jawline less pronounced. I was, for lack of a better word, androgynous. For most of my life, it had been a source of quiet shame. I was the guy who got called ma'am from behind until I turned around, the guy who had to actively try to sound more masculine just to avoid confusion. It was a constant, low-level humiliation that I had learned to live with. And now Leo wanted to use it. "That's a low blow," I muttered. "I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm desperate," he pleaded. "Think of it this way. You are the only person in the world who could possibly pull this off. It's like you have a superpower, and your best friend is in a burning building. Please, Patrick, I'm begging you." He had me. He knew he had me. The combination of his genuine panic and the appeal to our lifelong friendship was a potent one. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing the fallout. The best-case scenario was 5 minutes of excruciating embarrassment. The worst-case scenario, I didn't even want to think about it. "Fine," I breathed out, the word tasting like ash. "Fine, but you owe me, big time. I'm talking steak dinners for a year." "Anything you want my firstborn child, he's yours," he said. The relief in his voice so thick it was almost tangible. "Okay, she's going to call the plumber's number in 2 minutes. Just be Patricia, be nice, be sisterly." "What does sisterly even mean?" I hissed, but he had already hung up. I stared at my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. My throat felt dry. I took a few deep breaths, trying to consciously relax my vocal cords, to let my voice sit in that higher register I usually tried to suppress. I practiced a few words. "Hello." It came out soft, breathy, plausible. Maybe, God, this was insane. My phone rang. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize. Chloe. My hand trembled as I swiped to answer. I held the phone to my ear, took one last shuddering breath, and plunged into the abyss. "Hello," I said, aiming for pleasant and feminine. It came out as a nervous squeak. "Oh, hi, is this?" Patricia Chloe's voice was hesitant, laced with guilt. I cleared my throat, trying to find a better pitch. "Yes, it is. Who's this?" "This is Chloe, Leo's fiancée. I am so sorry to bother you. I think my number might have shown up as a missed call. I was being a little crazy, and I owe you and Leo a huge apology." The sincerity in her voice disarmed me. She sounded genuinely remorseful. It made the lie feel even worse. "Oh, it's no problem at all," I said, my voice settling into a smoother, more natural-sounding rhythm. It was surprisingly easy. It was just my own voice, without the forced effort to lower it. "Leo told me you might call. Don't you worry about a thing." "He's just the sweetest. Isn't he?" she gushed. "Calling you for gift ideas. I feel like such a fool for doubting him. He must be so embarrassed." "He's a wonderful man," I said, the words feeling true even if the context was a complete fabrication. "He loves you more than anything. Chloe, you should see the way he talks about you." We stayed on the phone for another 10 minutes. She asked me about my visit, and I spun a vague tale about coming into town for a work conference. I told her I was a graphic designer, a job I knew just enough about to sound convincing. She was warm and friendly, and as the conversation went on, my panic slowly receded, replaced by a strange, surreal calm. I wasn't Patrick, I was Patricia, and Patricia was nice. She was handling this. By the time we hung up, Chloe was practically gushing about her future sister-in-law. "We absolutely have to get lunch before you leave town," she said. "I'd love to meet you in person." My blood ran cold. "Oh, I'd love to, but my schedule is just packed," I stammered, my heart starting to pound again. "Back-to-back meetings. You know how it is." "Oh, of course. Well, next time then. It was so lovely talking to you, Patricia." "You too, Chloe." I hung up the phone and slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my head in my hands. I had done it. I had pulled it off. Leo was safe. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "You are a lifesaver, a god. I owe you my life. Steak dinner tomorrow night, my treat." I typed back a single word, "Never." Then I added again. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. With Leo and Chloe, it was never that simple. The fire had been put out, but I had a sickening feeling that I had just swapped a small brush fire for a future inferno. I had created Patricia, and now I had a horrible suspicion that I was going to have to deal with her. For about a week, it seemed like the crisis had been averted. Leo treated me to the most expensive steak dinner of my life. where he recounted Chloe's profuse apologies and renewed adoration with the relief of a man who had just stepped off a ledge. He couldn't stop thanking me. "Seriously, man, you were incredible. She said Patricia was the sweetest, most charming person she'd ever spoken to," he said, beaming at me over a massive T-bone. "Just don't ever ask me to do it again," I mumbled, sawing into my filet mignon. I think I aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Deal. Patricia has officially left town and returned to her fictional life," he declared, raising his beer in a toast to Patrick, the best friend and best fake sister a guy could ask for. I clinked my bottle against his, feeling the tension in my shoulders finally begin to ease. It was over, a ridiculous, one-time favor, a story we'd laugh about in a few years. That feeling of relief lasted exactly 8 days. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was at the grocery store, debating the merits of organic kale versus the regular, pesticide-ridden kind, when my phone rang. It was Leo. His voice had that same frantic edge as before. "She wants to send her a thank you gift," he said, without any preamble. "What who?" "Chloe. She wants to send Patricia a thank you gift for being so understanding. A gift basket or something. She asked for her address." I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool glass of the produce section. "Leo, just tell her she's a very private person and doesn't like getting mail." I tried. I said you'd just give it to her. But Chloe is insistent. She wants it to be a surprise. She says it's the polite thing to do after their lovely chat. She's starting to get suspicious again. "Patrick, she's asking why I'm being so weird about your own sister's address." The lie was a house of cards. And Chloe was blowing on it. Every time we patched one hole, another one appeared. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice flat. "I panicked again," he wailed. "I told her that Patricia is actually staying in town a little longer than expected, that her conference got extended, and that she's staying with you to save money." I pushed my cart away from the kale. All appetite gone. I walked slowly towards the deserted canned goods aisle. So let me get this straight. My fictional sister, Patricia, is now my fictional roommate. Temporarily, he insisted, just for a few more days. But the problem is, now Chloe thinks it's the perfect opportunity for them to finally meet. She wants to take Patricia out for that lunch she offered, to thank her in person. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. A phone call was one thing, a disembodied voice, an act of vocal mimicry. But this was a whole different level of insanity. "No," I said, the word coming out sharp and final. "Absolutely not, Leo. That's where I draw the line. It's impossible. You have to tell her the truth." "I can't. If I tell her now that I lied, that I had my best friend pretend to be a woman on the phone, she'll never trust me again. She'll think I'm capable of anything. This is worse than her thinking I was cheating. This is a betrayal of trust. Our engagement will be over, for real this time." He was right. As crazy as the situation was, the logic was sound. The initial lie had been to cover a misunderstanding. Unraveling that lie now would reveal a level of deceit that was far more damaging. He was trapped, and he had dragged me in with him. "What do you expect me to do?" "Leo," I demanded, my voice a harsh whisper. "Show up in a dress and a wig. Do you have any idea how ridiculous that is?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. A terrible, hopeful pause. "Would you?" he asked, his voice small. I almost hung up. I almost walked out of the store, got in my car, and just drove until I ran out of gas. But the image of Leo, my friend since kindergarten, the guy who dragged me out of my shell after my parents died, the guy who was my only real family, looking at me with those desperate, pleading eyes, I couldn't do it. "This is the last time," I said, my voice heavy with defeat. "One lunch, that's it. Then Patricia has a sudden family emergency and has to fly to Antarctica, and we never, ever speak of her again." "You are a saint, a legend," he crowed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I grumbled. "We have a very big, very hairy problem. Literally, I'm a man, Leo. I can't just show up as a woman." "My sister can help," he said quickly, already in problem-solving mode. "Sarah, she's a genius with this stuff. Makeup, clothes, all of it. And she can keep a secret. We'll go to her place. She'll get you sorted out. The lunch is tomorrow at 1. The rest of the day passed in a numb haze. I abandoned my grocery cart and went home. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I saw what Leo saw, the soft jawline, the full lips, the wide-set eyes under brows that were naturally arched, the lack of a 5 o'clock shadow. Even at the end of the day, for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at these features with shame, but with a kind of detached, horrified analysis. Could it work? Could I actually pass for a woman, even for an hour? In broad daylight, the thought made me feel physically ill. The next day, I drove to Sarah's apartment with a sense of impending doom. Leo was already there, pacing nervously. Sarah, Leo's older sister, was a whirlwind of calm, competent energy. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense smile that immediately put me a little at ease. "Okay, let's see what we're working with," she said, circling me like a sculptor examining a block of marble. Leo wasn't kidding. "You've got great bone structure, and your skin is better than mine. This is surprisingly workable." I just stood there, arms stiff at my sides. As she assessed me, I felt less like a person and more like a project. "First things first," she declared, clapping her hands together. "Underpinnings, you can't build a house on a shaky foundation." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with an armful of what looked like alien contraptions made of lace and satin. My stomach clenched. "This is not happening," I muttered. "It's happening," Sarah said cheerfully, holding up a beige bra. "You're about a 36B, I'd guess. We'll pad it a bit, and you'll need these." She handed me a pair of silky, hip-padding shorts, just to give you a bit more curve. "Go on into the bathroom, don't be shy." The next 20 minutes were the most humiliating of my life. I fumbled with the bra, the clasps feeling like some impossible puzzle. The padded shorts felt ridiculous, foreign against my skin. I felt like I was putting on a clown costume. When I emerged, feeling like a complete fool, Sarah just nodded approvingly. "Good, now for the fun part." She sat me down in front of a brightly lit vanity mirror. For the next hour, she worked on my face with an arsenal of brushes, sponges, and palettes. I watched in a state of horrified fascination as my own reflection disappeared, replaced by a stranger. Foundation smoothed over my skin, erasing any hint of stubble. A subtle contour slimmed my nose and softened my jaw further. Mascara darkened my lashes, making my eyes look bigger, more expressive. A touch of rosy blush gave my cheeks a healthy glow. "The key is not to overdo it," she explained as she worked. "We're not doing drag queen makeup. We're doing girl next door having lunch. Plausible and pretty." Then came the clothes. She'd bought a simple, navy blue A-line dress that fell to my knees. A pair of nude-colored flats. Heels are a recipe for disaster on your first go, she wisely noted, and a light gray cardigan. The fabric of the dress was soft and swished around my legs in a way that was utterly unfamiliar. The cardigan hid my broader shoulders. The final piece was the wig. It was a simple shoulder-length style in a warm brown, with soft waves and a side part. When Sarah settled it onto my head and brushed the bangs into place, I stared at the person in the mirror and felt a genuine shock. The person looking back at me wasn't Patrick in a dress. It wasn't a man playing dress-up. It was a woman, a stranger. Yes, but a plausible one. She was pretty, in a quiet, unassuming way. Her eyes, my eyes, looked wide and a little scared. "Wow," Leo breathed from the doorway. "Sarah, you're a witch." "It's not magic," Sarah said, adding a final slick of pink lip gloss to the stranger's mouth. "It's just knowing how to highlight what's already there. Okay, Patricia, I think you're ready for your debut." The name sent a jolt through me. I stood up, feeling wobbly and off balance, not from shoes, but from the sheer weirdness of it all. The dress brushed against my calves. I could feel the light constriction of the bra around my chest. My face felt tight under the makeup. Every nerve ending was firing with new, alien sensations. This wasn't a phone call. This was real. I was about to walk out into the world as someone else entirely, and as Leo guided me out the door, my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against the unfamiliar lace of the bra. I wasn't just walking to a lunch. I was walking off a cliff. Walking down the street was a masterclass in paranoia. Every person who passed us on the sidewalk felt like a judge and jury. I was convinced they could see through the disguise, that they were staring, pointing, whispering. I kept my head down, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other in the sensible but still strangely delicate flats. The city sound seemed amplified the traffic, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant wail of a siren, all of it felt like an alarm bell warning me of my own fraudulence. The air felt different on my skin. A light breeze caught the hem of my dress, and the sensation of it fluttering against my bare legs from the knee down was so startlingly new that I almost stumbled. I was used to the solid confinement of jeans, the predictable feel of denim. This was floaty, exposed. Leo, to his credit, seemed to be trying his best to act normal, which only made things more awkward. He kept a slight distance from me, as if he wasn't sure how to walk next to this new person. "You're doing great," he whispered, leaning in a little too close. "Just relax. You look totally normal." "I feel like I'm wearing a sign that says man in a dress," I hissed back, my voice coming out in the higher pitch I was trying to maintain. It sounded strained and unnatural to my own ears. "You don't. You look like my friend Patrick's sister, Patricia." He insisted, "Just try not to walk like you're carrying a fridge." I shot him a venomous glare, which probably wasn't a very Patricia thing to do. I tried to soften my stride, to take smaller steps, to let my hips move a little more, mimicking the way I'd seen Sarah walk. It felt like learning to use a new set of limbs. Everything was a conscious effort. Don't slouch. Keep your chin up, smile faintly. Don't swing your arms like a lumberjack. The restaurant Chloe had chosen was a bright, airy bistro with large windows facing the street. My stomach did a complete flip. We were going to be on full display. Chloe was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. She spotted us and her face broke into a wide, brilliant smile. She stood up and waved. There was no backing out now. "Deep breaths," Leo muttered, and then he was plastering a smile on his face and leading me towards the table. "Patricia, it's so wonderful to finally meet you in person," Chloe exclaimed. She moved in for a hug, and I froze for a split second before forcing my rigid arms to return the gesture. Her perfume was a cloud of lilac and vanilla. She was soft and warm, and the hug felt terrifyingly intimate. When she pulled back, she held me at arm's length, her eyes scanning my face. "Wow, Leo wasn't kidding. You are just lovely," she said, her expression open and genuine. There was no trace of suspicion in her eyes, only friendly admiration. "I love your dress. That color is perfect on you." "Oh, thank you," I stammered, my voice a little shaky. I felt my face flush, and I prayed it just looked like a becoming blush under the makeup. "It's so nice to meet you too, Chloe." We all sat down, and I immediately occupied myself with placing the napkin in my lap. Avoiding eye contact, the waiter came over, and I ordered an iced tea in a small, quiet voice, hoping he wouldn't look at me too closely. He didn't. He just smiled, jotted down our orders, and left. No one screamed. The building didn't collapse. The world just kept turning. The initial conversation was stilted. Leo did most of the talking, nervously bridging the gap between his fiancée and his best friend in drag. I mostly nodded and smiled, offering one-word answers whenever possible. But Chloe was persistent. She was genuinely curious about me, about Patricia. "So, what kind of graphic design do you do?" she asked, her chin resting in her hand, her focus entirely on me. I dredged up every bit of information I'd ever gleaned from online articles and conversations with an actual designer I knew. "Mostly branding and web stuff," I said. Finding my voice was becoming a little more stable. I work with a lot of small startups, helping them build their visual identity. "Oh, that's fascinating. It must be so creative." And just like that, we were talking. I told her about a fictional client, a boutique coffee shop, and found myself inventing details on the fly logos, color palettes, font choices. It was like improv acting, but my entire sense of self was on the line. To my astonishment, I was not terrible at it. The more I talked, the more Patricia began to feel less like a costume and more like a role, a character I was playing. The food arrived, and with it came a new set of challenges. How do you eat a salad gracefully? I speared a piece of lettuce with my fork, trying to move with a delicacy I did not possess. I took small bites. I dabbed my lips with my napkin. I was hyper-aware of every movement, every gesture. So, Patrick never mentioned he had a sister, Chloe said, changing the subject. He's so quiet about his family. We're not super close. Geographically, I said, improvising. It felt like a safe. Sad truth. He's here. I'm on the West Coast. We don't get to see each other as much as we'd like. Well, you have to tell me all the embarrassing childhood stories, she said with a laugh. I need ammunition for when he gets on my nerves. I felt a genuine, unforced smile spread across my lips. Oh, I have a few, I said, and for the next few minutes, I regaled her with toned-down, sisterly versions of my and Leo's childhood misadventures, simply swapping Leo's name for my own. It was bizarrely easy. I was talking about my own life, but from a different perspective, from Patricia's perspective. By the time we were finishing our meal, something strange had happened. I'd stopped feeling like an imposter on the verge of being discovered. The constant, thrumming anxiety in my chest had subsided to a low hum. I was participating in the conversation, laughing at Chloe's jokes, and even offering opinions. Chloe was easy to talk to. She was funny and engaging, and, away from her jealous streak, incredibly charming. I could see why Leo loved her so much. And she seemed to genuinely like Patricia. As we were getting ready to leave, she reached across the table and put her hand on my arm. I'm so glad we did this, she said, her eyes sincere. I feel like I've made a new friend. We have to do it again before you leave. My heart did a little lurch. I'd love that, I heard Patricia say, even as my own brain was screaming. No, 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 this was a one-time thing. We said our goodbyes on the sidewalk outside. Chloe gave me another hug, this one less awkward than the first. You take care, Patricia, and tell your brother to call his sister more often. She gave Leo a kiss and walked away, a happy little bounce in her step. Leo and I stood there in silence for a long moment after she was gone. I just stared at the spot where she disappeared around the corner. Well, Leo said finally, letting out a breath he seemed to have been holding for the entire hour. That could not have gone better. I didn't answer. I was processing the whirlwind of emotions, the terror, the awkwardness, the strange comfort, the surprising success. I had walked into that restaurant as a man terrified of being exposed. I had walked out as, well, I wasn't sure what I was. You were amazing, Leo continued, his voice full of awe. You were her. You were Patricia. I looked down at myself, at the navy dress, the delicate flats, the smooth hands with nails that Sarah had insisted on filing and buffing. I touched my face, feeling the impossibly smooth texture of the foundation. I wasn't Patrick, but I wasn't really Patricia either. I was a strange hybrid floating in the space between. Let's just get out of here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need to take this face off. But as we walked back to Sarah's apartment to deconstruct the woman we had built, a tiny, unnerving thought lodged itself in my brain. For 1 hour, in that sunny bistro, I hadn't been an anxious, awkward guy hiding behind a disguise. I had been a confident, charming woman having lunch with a friend, and a part of me, a part I wasn't ready to examine, hadn't hated it at all. My plan to have Patricia make a swift exit to Antarctica was foiled before it could even get off the ground. The success of the lunch had an unintended side effect. It didn't just placate Chloe. It made her enthusiastic. She was no longer a threat to be managed. She had become an active, and very friendly, problem. She started texting Leo about me. When is Patricia free again? There's this amazing little boutique I have to show her. Does Patricia like art museums? Leo would forward them to me with a string of panicked emojis. My response was always the same. Tell her I'm busy. Tell her I'm sick. Tell her I've been recalled to my home planet. But we were running out of excuses. Patricia, the busy professional, couldn't be busy forever, especially if she was supposedly staying in my apartment. The lie had taken on a life of its own, and it was demanding to be fed. The breaking point came about a week later. Chloe was planning a small get-together, a casual brunch at her and Leo's apartment to celebrate the 4-month mark until their wedding. It was just going to be them, her maid of honor, and the best man. That was me. It's the perfect opportunity for my best girl to meet my best guy, she had apparently told Leo. And Patricia has to come too. It'll be a little wedding party pre-meeting. Leo delivered the news to me with the grim solemnity of a doctor diagnosing a terminal illness. There's no way out of this one. Man, if your sister who is staying in your apartment doesn't come to a party at your place that you are also attending, it's over. The whole thing collapses. What are you suggesting? I asked, a cold dread seeping into my bones. That I show up as both Patrick and Patricia. Do a quick change in the bathroom every 15 minutes. No, he said, looking miserable. You have to be Patricia, and I'll have to tell Chloe that Patrick got called away on a last-minute work emergency. A really important one. Out of state. So that was the plan. I would be erasing myself from my own life to make room for my fictional sister. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. The day of the brunch arrived, gray and drizzling, mirroring my mood perfectly. I was back at Sarah's, going through the now familiar ritual of transformation, this time. It felt different. The first time had been pure, panicked novelty. This time, there was a grim sense of resignation. We need a different look, Sarah announced, holding up a finger. You can't be a one-outfit wonder. That's suspicious. She had gone shopping. This time, she pulled out a pair of slim-fitting, dark-wash jeans, women's jeans, which I'd never imagined putting on my body. They were soft, with a bit of stretch. Pulling them on was a strange sensation. They hugged my hips and thighs in a way men's jeans never did. With them, she paired a simple, cream-colored silk blouse that felt impossibly soft against my skin, and a pair of stylish-looking ankle boots with a low, chunky heel. Just an inch, she said, seeing my look of terror. It'll help with your posture. Just think heel-toe, not toe-heel. You'll be fine. The makeup was a little more defined this time. A soft, smoky brown eyeshadow made my eyes stand out, and she chose a slightly bolder, berry-colored lipstick when she finished with the wig. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who looked chic, put together. The jeans and blouse felt more casual, more real than the dress had. This looked less like a costume and more like an outfit. Learning to walk in the boots, even with their tiny heel, took a few minutes of awkward shuffling around her apartment. But Sarah was a patient teacher. Don't lock your knees, let your hips do the work. You're not marching into battle. When I finally arrived at Leo and Chloe's apartment after Leo had already made my excuses as Patrick, I felt a fresh wave of nausea. This wasn't a neutral restaurant. This was their home. A place I'd been to 100 times as myself. Walking in as Patricia felt like a profound violation. Chloe greeted me at the door with a warm hug. Patricia, I'm so glad you could make it. I was so bummed to hear Patrick had to bail, but I'm thrilled you're here. She led me into the living room, where a woman with fiery red hair and a bubbly smile was arranging pastries on a platter. Patricia, this is my maid of honor, Jessica, Chloe said. Jess, this is Patricia, Patrick's sister. Jessica's eyes lit up. Oh, it's so great to finally meet you. Chloe has been talking about you non-stop. She shook my hand, her grip firm and friendly. And I have to say, your brother is a terrible best man, ditching the pre-wedding brunch. For shame. I managed a small laugh. Work is his life, I said. The lie tasting bitter. I'm sure he feels awful. For the next hour, I navigated a social minefield. The three of them chatted easily about wedding plans, color schemes, and horror stories about bridesmaid dresses. I mostly listened, chiming in with safe, non-committal answers when asked a direct question. I was terrified of saying something that Patrick would know, but Patricia wouldn't. I found myself observing Jessica. She was confident and funny, gesturing with her hands as she told a story, laughing loudly, completely at ease in her own skin. I tried to subtly emulate her posture, the way she crossed her legs, the way she held her mimosa glass. The most dangerous moment came when Chloe started talking about me, about Patrick. He's the best, isn't he, she said, looking at me. But he's such a closed book sometimes. He and Leo have been friends forever, but I feel like I barely know him. What's he really like? I froze, a piece of quiche halfway to my mouth. Here I was, being asked to describe myself by my best friend's fiancé while pretending to be my own sister. The absurdity was staggering. He's quiet, I began, choosing my words carefully. He's always been more of an observer, but he's loyal, incredibly loyal. If you're one of his people, he'd do anything for you. The words were true, and saying them felt like a strange, out-of-body confession. "And what about his love life?" Jessica asked, wiggling her eyebrows. "Chloe and I are convinced he's secretly a romantic. Is there anyone special?" My face burned. "Not that he tells me about," I mumbled, taking a large gulp of my mimosa. "He keeps that stuff pretty close to the vest." "We'll find someone for him," Chloe declared resolutely. "He deserves to be happy." I just smiled weakly, my stomach twisting into knots. They were talking about me as if I wasn't even there. In a way, I wasn't. Patrick was a ghost, a topic of conversation. Patricia was the one sitting on the couch, sipping champagne and orange juice. As the brunch wound down, I started to relax a little. I'd survived. I hadn't slipped up. Jessica seemed to be warming up to me, asking me more about my design work, and we actually had a pleasant conversation about art and color theory. Just as I was starting to think I was in the clear, Chloe announced, "Okay, present time." She disappeared and came back with a beautifully wrapped box, which she handed to me. "This is just a little something to say thank you for being so sweet about my crazy, jealous moment a few weeks ago, and for being such a good sport about all this wedding talk." I was speechless. I took the box, my hands trembling slightly. "Chloe, you really didn't have to." "Nonsense. Open it." I carefully undid the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a beautiful silk scarf. It was a swirl of blues and grays, elegant and understated. "I saw it the other day and it just screamed Patricia to me," Chloe said, beaming. I lifted the scarf out of the box. The silk was cool and impossibly smooth against my fingertips. It was a genuinely thoughtful, beautiful gift. A gift for a woman who didn't exist. And it was given to me by a woman I was actively deceiving. A wave of guilt, so powerful it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Thank you, Chloe. It's really beautiful." I knew, in that moment, that this had gone too far. This wasn't just a silly prank to save Leo's skin anymore. This was a real, albeit one-sided, friendship. Chloe liked Patricia. She was investing time and emotion and money into a person who was nothing more than a fiction made of makeup, a wig and a whole lot of lies, and that felt fundamentally, heartbreakingly wrong. As I left their apartment, scarf clutched in my hand, I made a vow. This had to end. Soon. I didn't know how, but I couldn't keep doing this. The weight of Patricia was becoming too heavy to bear. My vow to end the charade was, like all my best intentions in this mess, immediately and thoroughly compromised. The problem was that Patricia had become useful. More than useful. She had become integrated. Chloe, now fully convinced she had a new best friend, started including Patricia in everything. And because Patricia was supposedly staying with me, and I, as Patrick, was always conveniently busy or out of town, it became easier to just show up as her than to keep inventing excuses for two different people. My life split into two distinct, parallel tracks. There was Patrick's life, which was shrinking by the day. It consisted of going to my quiet data analysis job, coming home, eating alone, and fielding texts from Leo about the next required appearance for Patricia. Then there was Patricia's life, which was vibrant and social and utterly exhausting. Patricia went shopping with Chloe and Jessica. This was perhaps the most surreal experience of all. I found myself in the women's section of department stores, not as a nervous man cutting through to get to the escalators, but as a participant. "Oh, Trish, you have to try this on," Chloe would say, holding up a dress or a blouse. She had started calling me Trish, a nickname that made my skin crawl and my heart ache in equal measure. The first time it happened, I flatly refused. "Oh no, it's not really my style." But Chloe was persistent. Before I knew it, I was being herded into a dressing room with an armful of clothes. Standing there, in the small curtained-off space, I felt a familiar panic, but there was no way out. I took a deep breath and started changing. I slipped on a soft, cashmere sweater in a lovely shade of teal. It was cozy and fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the three-way mirror. The woman looking back seemed to know what she was doing. She looked comfortable, natural. I stepped out to show Chloe and Jessica. "Oh, I love that on you," Jessica said. "The color brings out your eyes." Chloe added, "You have to get it." "I don't know," I started to say, thinking about the logistics. Where would I even keep it? What would I do with it? "Don't be silly. It's perfect," Chloe insisted. "My treat, a late birthday present." She didn't know when Patricia's birthday was. Of course, because Patricia didn't have one. But I couldn't argue. I ended up leaving the store with a new sweater, purchased for a fictional woman, as a gift from a friend I was lying to. The guilt was a constant companion, a bitter taste in the back of my throat. To manage this burgeoning second life, I had to get organized. Sarah had given me the basics, but I couldn't rely on her for every outing. On her advice, I bought a large duffel bag, Patricia's overnight bag. It became my transformation kit. Inside, I kept the wig on a styrofoam head, a carefully curated makeup bag, and a small but growing collection of clothes. A few blouses, the jeans, the navy dress, the new sweater. I also had to buy shoes, the flats, the ankle boots, and, after one disastrous attempt to navigate a cobbled street, a pair of stylish sneakers. My evenings as Patrick were now often spent practicing. I'd lock my apartment door, draw the blinds, and transform. I watched online tutorials, learning how to apply eyeliner in a straight line, how to blend eyeshadow, how to use concealer to hide the faint shadow on my upper lip. I practiced walking around my apartment in heels Sarah had lent me, wobbling at first, then slowly finding my balance. It was methodical, almost scientific. I was an actor preparing for a role. But sometimes, late at night, the lines would blur. I'd be standing in front of my mirror, fully transformed, the lighting soft, and I wouldn't see a man in a costume. I would see her, Patricia. She looked back at me with my eyes, but her expression was different, softer, more open. Patrick was all sharp angles and nervous energy. Patricia was composed, she was graceful. And in those quiet moments, a strange thought would surface. I liked her more than I liked myself. The physical sensations became less alien, more familiar. The constriction of the bra became a subtle feeling of support. The soft fabric of a blouse against my skin was comforting. I started to understand why women chose these clothes. There was a variety, a texture, a freedom of expression that my wardrobe of identical gray t-shirts and khaki pants simply didn't offer. I found myself lingering on shopping websites, not for me, but for her, admiring a particular cut of a dress or the color of a handbag. One afternoon, Chloe dragged me to a yoga class. It was a nightmare scenario. I couldn't wear my usual padding. I had to rely on a pair of yoga pants and a loose-fitting top to hide my shape. I spent the entire hour in the back of the class, terrified of being found out, my movements stiff and awkward. But as I moved through the poses, I became aware of my body in a new way. I felt the stretch in my hamstrings, the strength in my core. I was so used to thinking of my body as a source of shame, something to be hidden. Here, it was just a body, moving, breathing. After class, as we were packing up, an older woman came up to me. "You have such a lovely, graceful practice," she said with a kind smile. "You're a natural." I just stared at her, dumbfounded. Me graceful. It was the last word I would ever use to describe myself. But she wasn't talking to Patrick. She was talking to Patricia. That was the most disorienting part of it all. As Patrick, I moved through the world feeling invisible at best, and awkwardly conspicuous at worst. I was quiet. I kept to myself. I assumed people didn't notice me, and I preferred it that way. But as Patricia, people saw me. They smiled at me on the street. Men held doors open. Women complimented or rather, Sarah's sense of style. I was having conversations with strangers in coffee shops, with cashiers, with people I would have never made eye contact with as myself. Patricia was approachable. She was someone people wanted to talk to. And every time it happened, it sent a jolt through me, a mixture of terror and a strange, illicit thrill. I was a fraud, a lie walking around in a pair of well-fitting jeans. But the validation, the simple human connection that Patricia received so effortlessly, was something Patrick had craved his entire life. The double life was a tightrope walk over a canyon, but the view from the rope was intoxicating, and I was starting to become afraid of what would happen when I inevitably had to get off. The wedding preparations were escalating, and with them, so did Patricia's involvement, Chloe, in a stroke of what she thought was genius and I thought was pure evil. Decided to throw a joint bachelorette party, not a wild booze-fueled weekend in Vegas, but a slightly more civilized, co-ed weekend at a rented lake house. It'll be so fun, she chirped over the phone to Patricia. We can all hang out together, boating, grilling, bonfires. You have to come. This, of course, presented an existential crisis. Patrick, as the best man, was required to be there. Patricia, as the bride's new bestie, was also required to be there. It was a paradox that threatened to tear a hole in the space-time continuum, or at least in Leo's increasingly fragile sanity. The solution was as convoluted as everything else had become. Leo, bless his panicked heart, concocted a story. Patrick had a major, unavoidable work project that would keep him occupied during the day on Saturday, but he could drive up for the evening festivities and stay the night. Patricia, meanwhile, could ride up with Chloe and Jessica on Friday and stay the whole weekend. This meant I would have to spend Friday and Saturday as Patricia, then find a way to secretly transform into Patrick on Saturday evening. It was a logistical nightmare. The lake house was beautiful. A sprawling rustic cabin with a huge deck overlooking a placid, tree-lined lake. The weekend started calmly enough. I, as Patricia, helped Chloe and Jessica with decorations, made small talk with Chloe's other bridesmaids, and generally tried to stay out of the way. I was wearing a simple summer dress, a wide-brimmed sun hat, and sunglasses, a combination I hoped would make me both seasonally appropriate and as unnoticeable as possible. The groom's party started to arrive on Saturday afternoon. I watched from the deck as Leo's friends, guys I'd known for years, piled out of their cars. They were laughing and joking, and I felt a sharp pang of loneliness. I was supposed to be with them, one of the guys. Instead, I was hiding in plain sight, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The real trouble started with the arrival of Chloe's cousin, a guy named Mark. He was handsome in a conventional square-jawed way, with a confident smile and an easy charm. He was introduced to me as I was helping bring out a tray of drinks. "Mark, this is Patricia, Patrick's sister," Chloe said. "Patricia, this is my cousin, Mark." He took my hand, his grip warm and firm. "A pleasure to meet you, Patricia," he said, his eyes lingering on mine for a moment longer than necessary. Any sister of the elusive Patrick is a friend of mine. I gave him a tight, polite smile and quickly withdrew my hand. "Nice to meet you." Throughout the afternoon, Mark seemed to be everywhere I was. If I was by the lake, he'd wander over to comment on the view. If I was in the kitchen, he'd appear, looking for a beer and striking up a conversation. He was a classic flirt, laying it on thick, and I had absolutely no idea how to handle it. I'd never been on the receiving end of this kind of attention. He asked me about my work, my life on the West Coast, my hobbies. I gave him the same vague, practiced answers I gave everyone, but he seemed genuinely interested. He complimented my dress. He told me I had a beautiful smile. Every compliment felt like a small electric shock, a confusing mix of flattery and pure, unadulterated panic. He was flirting with a person who didn't exist. He was attracted to a costume. The peak of my discomfort came that evening. The sun had set, the bonfire was lit, and someone had put on music. People were talking and laughing, and the atmosphere was relaxed and happy. I was sitting on a log a little away from the main group, nursing a cup of cider, when Mark came and sat down next to me. Hiding from the crowd, he asked, his voice low and warm. "Just enjoying the quiet for a minute," I said, not looking at him. "I get that," he said. "It's a lot." He was silent for a moment, and then he said, "You know, Chloe told me you're single." My entire body went rigid. "Did she?" "Yeah, I have to say, I find that hard to believe." He shifted a little closer. I could smell his cologne, a generic, woodsy scent. "A beautiful, smart, interesting woman like you. The guys on the West Coast must be blind." I had to stop this. It was getting too real, too fast. I stood up abruptly. I should probably go help with the s'mores. But he stood up with me, stepping into my path. "Hey, wait a second," he said gently. He reached out and tucked a stray piece of my wig behind my ear. The gesture was so casual, so intimate, it sent a wave of panic through me. His fingers brushed against my cheek, and the skin tingled. "I was just thinking," he said, his eyes searching mine, "that maybe after the wedding, you and I could get a drink sometime. I'm out in LA for work pretty often." My mind was racing. This was the ultimate test. A man was asking Patricia out on a date. He was looking at this construction of fabric and makeup and seeing a desirable woman. And for one insane, fleeting second, a part of me felt a flicker of triumph. I had done it. I had created a person so convincing that someone wanted to date her. But the triumph was immediately swallowed by the horror of the situation. "Mark, that's very flattering," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I took a half step back, creating some space between us. "But I don't think that's a good idea." His face fell, his confidence wavering. "Oh, is there someone else?" "It's complicated," I said, which was the understatement of the century. "I'm not really in a place to date right now." The rejection, as gentle as I could make it, seemed to land. He looked disappointed but respectful. "Okay, I understand. My loss." He gave me a small, sad smile and then retreated back to the main group around the fire. I stood there for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt shaky, my hands trembling. This was the moment the double life had been building towards. It wasn't just about fooling people anymore. It was about navigating the real-world consequences of that deception. I had just rejected a man, not because I wasn't interested, but because the person he was interested in was a complete fabrication. The interaction left me feeling hollowed out, a strange mix of guilt for deceiving him and a profound sadness for the woman he thought he was talking to. Patricia could be asked out, Patrick never was. Later that night, after a frantic and clandestine transformation in a locked bathroom, I emerged as Patrick. I walked out to the bonfire, and Leo clapped me on the shoulder. "There he is, the working man. Glad you could make it." Mark glanced over at me, his eyes doing a quick dismissive scan. He gave me a curt nod and then turned back to his conversation. To him, I was just some guy, the brother of the interesting, beautiful woman he'd been talking to earlier. I was a footnote to a more compelling story. And as I stood there, watching the firelight dance on the faces of my friends, I felt more like an imposter as Patrick than I had all weekend as Patricia. The drive home from the lake house was quiet. I drove my own car. Having arrived late as Patrick, Leo rode with me. He kept trying to make conversation, to joke about the weekend, but I couldn't engage. My mind was a tangled mess of conflicting emotions from the encounter with Mark. "You okay, man?" Leo finally asked, his voice laced with concern. "You've been weird ever since you showed up last night." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. Long week." He didn't press, but he kept shooting me word glances. How could I explain it to him? How could I articulate the profound sense of dislocation I was feeling, that I had spent the weekend feeling more seen and alive as a fictional woman than I had in years as myself? That being dismissed by Mark as Patrick hurt in a way that being admired as Patricia had terrified me. It was too complicated, too messy. I barely understood it myself. The next few weeks were a blur of final wedding preparations. There were meetings with florists, cake tastings, and a disastrous dance lesson that Patricia had to attend with Chloe and Jessica because Patrick was, once again, stuck on a conference call. I was becoming an expert at the quick change, transforming in my car in dimly lit parking garages, my duffel bag always at the ready. The lines between my two lives were no longer just blurring. They were bleeding into each other. At my day job, I found myself analyzing data with a new perspective, noticing patterns and design flaws in user interfaces that I would have missed before. It was the graphic designer in Patricia, the part of me I'd invented, seeping into my professional life. I even submitted a report with suggestions for a visual overhaul of our dashboard, and my boss was surprisingly impressed. At home, my apartment was slowly being taken over. Patricia's clothes hung in a garment bag in the back of my closet. Her makeup was organized in a train case under my bathroom sink. Her shoes were lined up neatly next to my own worn-out sneakers. Sometimes I'd open my closet and the faint scent of Chloe's lilac and vanilla perfume, which had clung to Patricia's cardigan, would drift out. My space no longer felt entirely my own. The turning point, the moment where the last thread of my old reality snapped, came on a Tuesday night, about a week before the wedding. I had just gotten home from another Patricia errand, helping Chloe pick out a last-minute gift for her parents. I was exhausted. The constant vigilance, the mental gymnastics of being two people, was taking its toll. I went into the bathroom to begin the process of deconstruction. I peeled off the false eyelashes, wiped away the eyeshadow and mascara. I scrubbed my face with a cleansing balm until every trace of foundation was gone. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't feel a sense of relief. I didn't feel like I was returning to myself. I looked at my reflection. The face staring back was mine, Patrick's face. The jaw was a little softer than most, the lips a little fuller, but without the makeup to enhance those features, without the wig to frame them, my face looked wrong. It looked plain, incomplete. The features that had once been a source of shame now just seemed bland. I ran a hand through my own short, unremarkable hair. It felt bristly and unfamiliar after the softness of the wig. I looked down at the simple t-shirt and jeans I'd changed into. They felt like a costume, a drab, ill-fitting one. The clothes felt bulky, shapeless. I felt like a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. My gaze drifted to the corner of the bathroom, where the wig was resting on its stand. Patricia's wig. On a strange impulse, I walked over and picked it up. The synthetic hair was cool and smooth. I walked back to the mirror, and without really thinking, I settled it onto my head. And there she was. Even with my face scrubbed clean of makeup, the wig changed everything. It softened my face, highlighted my eyes. It transformed me, and in that moment, looking at the reflection of Patrick's face framed by Patricia's hair, I felt a shocking, gut-wrenching moment of recognition. This, I thought, my heart pounding, this feels right. It was a terrifying thought. It was illogical. It was insane, but it was also undeniably true. The reflection with the long hair looked more like me than the one without. Driven by this bizarre revelation, I started to put the makeup back on. Not the full face I wore for Chloe, but just a little. Some concealer under my eyes, a touch of mascara to define my lashes, a bit of tinted lip balm. It wasn't Patricia's face. It was my face, just all enhanced, softened. I stared at the person in the mirror for a long, long time. This person wasn't quite Patrick, and not quite Patricia. It was someone in between, someone I hadn't met before, and I wasn't afraid of them, for the first time. I looked at my reflection without a filter of shame or a feeling of being a fraud. I took off the wig and put it away. I changed out of my t-shirt and into the soft cashmere sweater Chloe had bought for Patricia. I pulled on the women's jeans. They fit better than any pair of men's jeans I owned. They hugged my body in a way that felt correct. I walked through my quiet apartment, an alien in my own home, dressed in a strange mix of identities, and I realized the truth. The disguise wasn't the dress and the makeup. The disguise was the gray t-shirt and the ill-fitting pants. Patrick was the role I had been playing my whole life, the role of a man who was constantly apologizing for not being masculine enough, who was trying to hide the parts of himself that didn't fit. Patricia wasn't a lie. She was an exaggeration, a caricature, maybe, but she was born from something real inside me. She was the confidence I never had. She was the grace I never thought I possessed. She was the part of me that wasn't afraid to be seen. The whole charade had been built on a lie to save Leo, but somewhere along the way, it had become a strange, twisted, and accidental journey of self-discovery. I had started this thinking I was helping my friend, but I had ended up finding a piece of myself I never knew was missing. The wedding was in 5 days. The lie had to end. Patricia had to disappear. But as I stood in the middle of my living room, feeling the soft wool of the sweater against my skin, I knew that even when she was gone, I could never fully go back to being just Patrick again. Something new had been awakened, and I had no idea what to do with it. The day of the wedding arrived in a blaze of autumn glory. The air was crisp, the leaves were a riot of red and gold, and the sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. It was the kind of day that felt full of promise and new beginnings. For Leo and Chloe, it was the start of their life together. For me, it felt like an ending. This was Patricia's last day. My role was twofold and deeply stressful. I was to arrive early at the venue, a beautiful old country inn, as Patricia to help Chloe and the bridesmaids get ready. Then, at the last possible moment, I was to perform my final, most daring transformation and emerge as Patrick, the best man, just in time for the ceremony. The logistics gave me a splitting headache. The morning was a flurry of hairspray, champagne, and nervous energy. I was dressed in a simple, elegant dark green dress that Sarah had helped me pick out, something befitting a close friend of the bride. I moved through the bridal suite on autopilot, helping Chloe with her veil, fetching glasses of water, and offering words of encouragement. I felt a profound sense of melancholy. This was the last time I would be in this world of easy female camaraderie that I had been allowed to visit. Chloe was a nervous wreck, fluttering around the room like a beautiful, lace-clad bird at one point. She pulled me aside, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Trish, I couldn't have gotten through these last few months without you," she said, gripping my hands tightly. "You've become one of my best friends. I'm so glad Leo introduced us." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. "You're going to be so happy, Chloe," I managed to say, my voice thick. "Leo is a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," she whispered. Just before it was time for the ceremony to start, I made my excuses. "I just need to run to my room for a minute to touch up my makeup," I said, my heart starting to pound. This was it. I slipped out of the bridal suite and hurried to the small room the inn had provided for me. My duffel bag was waiting. Inside was a black suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie. Patrick's uniform. The transformation back was frantic and joyless. I stripped off the green dress, folding it carefully and placing it in the bag like a relic. I took off the bra, the soft padded shorts. I scrubbed my face raw with makeup wipes, watching as Patricia vanished in smudges of beige and pink. The hardest part was taking off the wig. My own short hair felt alien. My face, bare and pale in the harsh bathroom light, looked like a stranger's. I put on the suit. The stiff fabric felt restrictive, the tie like a noose around my neck. I looked in the mirror and saw Patrick. He looked tired. He looked sad. He looked like a ghost at a feast. I took a deep breath, straightened the suffocating tie, and walked out of the room, leaving the duffel bag and Patricia behind. I made it to the back of the ceremony hall just as the music was starting. Leo was there, pacing nervously. When he saw me, his face flooded with relief. "You made it," he breathed, clapping me on the shoulder. I was starting to think I'd have to go through with this alone. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, my voice sounding rough and low in my own ears. The ceremony was beautiful. Chloe was radiant, and the way Leo looked at her was enough to make even the most cynical person believe in love. I stood beside him, performing my duties as best man, feeling completely disconnected from it all. I watched Chloe at the altar, laughing as Leo fumbled with the ring. And I saw not just my best friend's wife, but my friend, the friend who had bought me a scarf, who had confided in me, who had called me her bestie, and she had no idea I was standing right there. The reception was even harder. People kept coming up to me. "Patrick, good to finally see you. We missed you at the lake house. Hey, man, your sister is great. You're lucky to have her." Each comment was a small, sharp jab. I'd smile and nod, making small talk, feeling like I was floating outside my own body. During a lull, I saw Chloe talking to Jessica, a worried frown on her face. "Have you seen Trish?" I heard her ask. "She said she was just touching up her makeup, and then she disappeared. I hope she's okay." My stomach churned. Patricia couldn't just vanish. I had to give her an exit. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Chloe. I'd gotten a cheap burner phone for Patricia early on, a necessary prop for the deception. "So sorry to have disappeared," I typed, my fingers clumsy. "Got a call from work. Emergency project. Had to rush to the airport. I'm so sorry to miss the rest of the night. You looked breathtaking. Love, Trish." A moment later, I saw Chloe read the text. Her face fell with disappointment, but she typed back a reply. My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew I couldn't look at it. Not now. Later that evening, after the speeches and the first dance, I stepped outside onto a quiet terrace for some air. The cool night felt good on my hot skin. A moment later, Leo joined me. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the dark gardens. "Well, we did it," he said quietly. "We pulled it off." "Yeah," I said, "we did." He was quiet for a moment. Chloe was really sad Patricia had to leave. She's really grown attached to her. "I know." He turned to look at me, his expression serious. "This whole thing, it got way out of hand. I'm sorry. Patrick, I never should have asked you to do any of it. It wasn't fair to you." I just shook my head, unable to speak. "But," he continued, his voice softer, "I've also never seen you like that when you were her at the lake house. I saw you talking to Mark. You were smiling, laughing. You looked happy." He paused. "I don't see you look happy like that very often, man." His observation, so simple and so astute, cracked open the dam I had built around my emotions. My eyes burned. "Leo," I started, but my voice broke. He didn't say anything. He just put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of silent, unwavering friendship that we had shared since we were kids. "It's okay," he said softly. "Whatever it is, it's okay." We stood there in silence for a while longer. Patricia was gone. The lie was over. Leo and Chloe were married. Everything should have gone back to normal, but I knew it couldn't. I had changed. The mirror in my bathroom had shown me a truth I could no longer ignore. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between the man I was supposed to be and the person I felt I was becoming. There was no easy path forward. It would be confusing and probably painful, but for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't shame or fear. It was a tiny spark of possibility. I thought about the duffel bag in my hotel room, the green dress, the makeup, the wig. My first instinct had been to throw it all away, to erase every trace of Patricia. But now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe it wasn't an ending. Maybe, just like for Leo and Chloe, this was a new beginning, my own. Strange, terrifying, an utterly unexpected wedding day, a marriage of the two halves of myself. "I think," I said to Leo, my voice quiet but clear in the cool night air, "I need to go try on something new."